I came home on a Tuesday. That wasn't the plan. I was supposed to land Friday evening, take a cab back from the airport, maybe order Thai food and fall asleep watching something mindless. That was the plan. But the conference in Denver wrapped up 2 days early. The keynote speaker had a medical emergency. Half the sessions got canceled, and my manager texted me at 7 a.m. saying just go home, get some rest, good work this week. So I booked the first flight out, didn't tell anyone, and figured I'd surprise my cat and maybe actually clean my bathroom before the weekend. I own a 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburb outside Columbus. I bought it 2 years ago, right after I turned 31, after 7 years of saving and one very painful conversation with the financial advisor who told me I was spending too much on coffee. The house cost me $620,000. It's not a mansion. It has a small yard, a 2-car garage, a basement I use as a home office, and a kitchen with a window that faces east, so the morning light comes in exactly right. I love that house more than I have ever loved anything I bought with my own hands and my own money. Every room in it is mine. My younger brother, I'll call him my brother because that's what he is, even when I don't want him to be, is 27 and has never quite figured out the part of adulthood that involves paying for things. He and his girlfriend have been renting an apartment across town for the past 3 years. They've been talking about moving somewhere cheaper for almost as long. It was always almost. Almost found a place. Almost found a place. Almost saved enough. Almost got it together. I had stopped asking. I gave him a spare key when I moved in. This is important. I gave him a spare key for emergencies, in case I locked myself out, in case something burst, in case the cat needed someone to check on her while I was away. I gave it to him because he was my brother and I trusted him. I want to be very clear about what that key was for because what he did with it was something else entirely. The cab pulled up to my house at 2014 in the afternoon. I remember the time because I looked at my phone right before I got out, calculating whether I had time to stop at the grocery store before the afternoon rush. I grabbed my bag from the trunk, tipped the driver, and turned toward my front door. That's when I heard it. A low mechanical grinding, the kind that vibrates through concrete, coming from my garage. I stopped on the front walkway and just stood there for a second. My garage door was closed, but there was a white van in my driveway, one of those contractor vans, the kind with magnetic signs on the side, and underneath my garage door, I could see light and dust. I put my key in the front door, walked through the house, and opened the door that connects the hallway to the garage. I don't have a word for what I saw. Or I have too many, and none of them are printable. The garage was completely gutted. The drywall along the back wall had been torn out. There were 2 men I had never seen before standing in the middle of it with a shop vac and a measuring tape. There were wires hanging from the ceiling. My shelving unit, the one where I kept my tools, my camping gear, my grandfather's old toolbox, was pushed into the corner and partially disassembled. And standing off to one side, watching it all with her arms crossed and a coffee cup in her hand like she was supervising a renovation on HGTV, was my brother's girlfriend. She saw me first. Her face did something complicated. Not guilt, exactly. More like the expression of someone who has just realized the surprise party is not going as planned. "Oh," she said, "you're back early." "What," I said, very slowly, "is happening in my garage?" She started talking before I'd finished the sentence. It all came out in this practiced rush, like she'd rehearsed it, like she'd thought about this moment and prepared for it. She said my brother had mentioned that I had a lot of extra space. She said they'd been having such a hard time with rent. She said they just needed somewhere to stay while they got back on their feet. She said the garage would be perfect. It had good bones. They'd already talked to a contractor. They just needed to add insulation and a small bathroom, and then it could be a real living space, and wouldn't that be nice, having family close by? I let her finish. I actually let her get through the whole thing. Then I said, "Where is my brother?" She said he was on his way. He'd be there in 20 minutes. I turned to the 2 contractors. I asked them who had hired them. The one holding the measuring tape said a man had contacted them last week, signed a contract, paid a deposit. He showed me the contract on his phone. My brother had signed it. The job description said garage conversion, living quarters. The deposit was $2,000. I asked them to please stop what they were doing and wait outside. To their credit, they did. I called my brother. He picked up on the second ring. Before he could say anything, I said, "I am standing in my garage. Come here now." He showed up in 18 minutes. He had this look on his face, I know this look. I've seen it since we were kids. The one that means he knows he did something wrong but has already constructed an entire argument for why it wasn't really wrong. He walked in through the garage door, looked at me, looked at his girlfriend, and then took a breath like he was about to give a speech. He said they'd been struggling. He said his girlfriend's hours got cut at work. He said the rent increase at their apartment was brutal and their lease was up in 6 weeks. He said he'd been trying to figure out what to do, and then he actually said this. He thought, Jenna has all that space, and she's not even using the garage, and it's just sitting there. He said he figured I wouldn't mind. He said he was going to tell me, he just wanted to get it started first so I could see how good it was going to look. I let him finish too. Then I said, "You made a copy of my key." He paused, just for a second. Then he said that yes, he'd had a copy made a few months ago. He said he needed to check on the cat once when I was traveling and couldn't reach me. He said he forgot to mention it. He'd had a copy of my key for months. Made without my knowledge, used without my permission. To let contractors into my house while I was in another state? I want to describe what that felt like, but I'm not sure I can do it justice. It wasn't just anger, it was something colder than anger. It was the feeling of realizing that someone you trusted had been treating your trust as a resource they could use whenever they needed it. I told him I wanted the contractors paid for their time and off my property within the hour. I told him I wanted his key, both keys, the original and the copy, before he left. I told him that whatever deposit he'd paid to the contractors was his problem, not mine, and that I would be contacting a lawyer that afternoon about the damage to my property. His girlfriend started crying. My brother said I was being dramatic. He said it wasn't that deep. He said this is what family does. They help each other out. I told him that helping each other out doesn't include breaking into someone's house and tearing out their walls. I got my keys. I stood in my driveway until the contractor van was gone. And then I went inside, sat down at my kitchen table, and called my attorney. Her name is not important, but she has been my attorney since I bought the house, and she is extremely good at her job. I told her everything. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Walk me through the property damage." I walked back through the garage while we talked. The drywall along the back wall was largely demolished. 2 full panels gone. A third partially removed. The electrical wiring had been pulled and rerouted, which she immediately flagged as potentially unpermitted work. The shelving had been damaged when they moved it. My grandfather's toolbox had a long scratch along the side that hadn't been there before. And my car? My actual car, which I park in that garage specifically because the neighborhood has had break-ins, was not there. I hadn't even noticed it was missing until I started walking through. I called my brother back. I asked him where my car was. He said he'd moved it to street parking so the contractors would have room to work. He said it had been on the street for the past 3 days. My car had been parked on a public street, unsecured, for 3 days without my knowledge or consent while my garage was being gutted. My attorney, still on the line, heard me repeat this back to him. She said, and I will never forget this, she said, "Okay, now we're also talking about unauthorized use of a vehicle." I hung up with my brother and finished the conversation with her. We talked for 45 minutes. By the end of it, I had a clear picture of what had happened, what it would cost to restore, and what my legal options were. She walked me through everything: the property damage, the unpermitted electrical work, the unauthorized use of the vehicle, the unauthorized key duplication. She told me to call my homeowner's insurance company before the end of the day. She told me to document everything with photographs before I touched anything. She told me not to communicate with my brother directly anymore and to let her handle it. I photographed every inch of that garage. I photographed the missing drywall, the hanging wires, the scratched toolbox, the disassembled shelving. I photographed the street where my car had been sitting. I called my insurance company and opened a claim. The agent I spoke to was businesslike and methodical, and by the end of the call, she had opened a claim for property damage and flagged the unpermitted electrical work for separate review. I also called a locksmith and had every lock in my house rekeyed that evening. I want to be honest about the next part, because I think people imagine that doing the right thing feels clean and satisfying in the moment. It doesn't, always. That night, I sat in my house, my properly locked, properly secured house, and felt something that wasn't quite triumph. My brother had had a key to my home for 2 years. He was the person I called when I thought I'd left the stove on. He was the person who helped me move my couch when I bought it because it didn't fit through the door the normal way. And he had looked at my trust and decided it was a tool he could use. The legal process took about 2 months. My attorney sent a formal demand letter to my brother outlining the damages and requesting reimbursement. The cost to restore the garage to its original condition came to just over $11,000. Drywall, electrical rework done properly, and a code, replacement shelving, and professional cleaning. The insurance company covered most of it. But they also subrogated against my brother and his girlfriend, meaning they went after them directly for reimbursement. My attorney filed a separate small claims action for the toolbox, which had sentimental value that the insurance didn't cover. My brother called me approximately 15 times in the first 2 weeks. My parents called me 4 times. My mother said I was tearing the family apart over a misunderstanding. My father said my brother had meant well, that he was just trying to find a solution. I told my father, the one time I answered, that meaning well and doing well are 2 different things, and that good intentions don't authorize someone to demolish a wall in my house. My brother's girlfriend emailed me a long letter. I forwarded it to my attorney without reading past the second paragraph. The settlement came through 6 weeks after the demand letter. My brother and his girlfriend agreed to reimburse the insurance company for the full repair cost over a payment plan, and they paid me separately for the toolbox. The unpermitted electrical work was reported to the county, which resulted in a separate fine for the contractor. I hadn't intended that consequence, but I wasn't sorry about it either. The contractor had pulled permits on my property without verifying ownership. That's not a paperwork issue. That's a serious problem. By the time it was all resolved, the garage looked better than it had before. I had the walls repainted, bought new shelving from a place I'd been eyeing for months, and finally mounted the pegboard for my tools the way I'd always meant to. My car went back in the garage where it belonged, where it has been every night since. I also had a home security system installed, cameras at the front door, the back door, and the garage entrance, smart locks that log every entry. Motion-activated lighting around the perimeter. Not because I'm afraid, but because the experience reminded me that security isn't just about strangers. Sometimes it's about people who have your phone number and know where you keep the spare batteries. I want to say something about my brother, because I've been thinking about it a lot. I don't think he's a bad person. I think he looked at his situation, the tightening finances, the lease ending, the pressure, and he saw a solution, and the solution happened to be my property. I think he made himself believe that because we were family and because he had a key and because I am generally a person who helps people, that it would be fine. I think he convinced himself all the way through the conversation with the contractor and the signing of the contract and the first day of demolition that it would be fine. What he didn't understand, what a lot of people don't understand, is that assuming permission is not the same as having it, that using someone's trust as a substitute for their consent is a violation, regardless of how good your reasons are. We don't talk the way we used to. I'm not going to pretend that the legal process didn't change something between us, or that his 15 unanswered calls didn't mean something. We see each other at family events and it's civil and a little hollow, and I'm still figuring out what I want that relationship to look like. But my house is mine. Every lock, every wall, every window is mine. That hasn't changed. When I come home now, from trips, from work, from the grocery store, I come in through the front door and I hear the quiet of my own house and I feel something I can only describe as solid. The garage light is on a timer now. The shelves are organized exactly the way I want them. My grandfather's toolbox sits on the workbench with a small scratch along the side that wasn't there before, and I decided not to refinish it. I've decided to leave it exactly as it is. It reminds me that what's mine is worth protecting, and that I'm the only one who gets to decide what happens inside these walls. I've thought a lot about what made my brother think he could do what he did, not in an angry way, not anymore. More like the way you turn a strange object over in your hands, trying to understand how it's shaped. He didn't think of himself as someone doing something wrong. That's the part that took me a while to sit with. He thought he was solving a problem. His problem, yes, but a problem nonetheless, and somewhere in the process of solving it, he decided that my property, my privacy, my consent were variables he could just subtract from the equation, not because he's cruel, because he'd never had to think of me as someone with a boundary he actually had to respect. That's what entitlement really looks like up close. It's not dramatic. It's not villainous. It's just a person who has gotten so used to things working out for them, or someone stepping in to fix it, that they stop factoring in the cost to whoever's doing the fixing. My brother had seen me say yes enough times that he started treating yes as my default. He stopped asking because he assumed the answer. And I let that happen for a long time without realizing it. Here's what I know now. Protecting what you've built isn't selfishness. It's a form of self-respect that nobody can hand you. I spent 7 years saving for that house. 7 years of early mornings and skipped vacations and one very honest conversation with a financial advisor who told me things I didn't want to hear. Every square foot of that house represents a decision I made, a sacrifice I followed through on, a version of myself who showed up even when it was hard. When my brother walked in with a contractor and started tearing out walls, he wasn't just damaging drywall. He was treating all of that like it didn't matter. The legal process wasn't fun. It wasn't clean. There were nights when I sat with my phone in my hand, my mother's number on the screen, wanting to just make it easier on everyone and let it go. But I kept coming back to one thought. If I let this go, I'm not keeping the peace. I'm teaching everyone around me exactly how much my boundaries are worth. And the answer they'd learn is nothing. So I didn't let it go. I documented. I called my attorney. I filed the claim. I answered the demand letter questions honestly and completely. I did every single boring, procedural, unglamorous step that needed to be done. And 2 months later, the garage was restored, the insurance was settled, and the locks were changed on a house that had never felt more mine. What I want anyone to take from this is simple. The moment you decide that your property, your work, your life is worth protecting, and then you actually do the work of protecting it, something shifts. Not in a dramatic way, in a quiet way. You stop waiting for someone to validate the boundary and you just hold it. That shift is available to everyone. It doesn't require perfect circumstances or a lot of money or the right connections. It requires deciding that what you built matters and then acting like it does. My grandfather's toolbox still has that scratch on it. I could have it refinished. I chose not to. It sits on my workbench every day and reminds me that some things cost more than money and that I was willing to pay whatever it took to keep what was mine.